sometimes our conversations don't go to plan. So we can think, they come in, maybe they're a bit grumpy or they've done something, and we can say things like, I'm sick of you walking around in a huff, what's wrong with you? And expect them to respond and expect them to sit us down and tell us all the things that's going on in their life when that's the tone that we've used.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, thank you for joining us for the podcast episode today with Martine Oglethorpe. It's a real joy for me today to be able to talk with Martine. Martine and I have worked together before on parenting webinars and on conferences, and she's just an amazing specialist in the areas of digital wellbeing and the online world for parents and for teachers in particular. She's also a mental health educational consultant at Headspace. Not only that, Martine is a mum of 5 boys, so she's superwoman and extra special because she has been a volunteer with Heartfelt for over 11 years. So, Martine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Jodi. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to chat to you.
Oh, it's so good to see you again. Martine and I get to see each other, but you only get to hear us, but we get to actually see each other, which is very nice. We're all rugged up today. So, Martine, you really do such wonderful work in the mental health space, whether it's in the online world and supporting families and schools through that side of your business, which is called The Modern Parent, and I'll share all of Martine's details a little later, but also through Headspace. And so what I'd really love to do is to find out, could you tell us about Headspace? Could you help our listeners learn more about Headspace? And what's the sort of work that you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. Well, Headspace is our national youth mental health support organisation that does support young people between the ages of 12 and 25 and their families. And it does that in a number of ways. One of the ways is through just providing a whole range of information and resources for families, for parents and carers, and for schools and other organisations. And it also has an online component. So there's the headspace.org.au, where there's a great website, again, with lots of resources, but also things like online chats, and people get to be involved in those chats about a whole range of different topics, and they can get that phone and online counselling as well. And the third way is via the Headspace centres. So they're the physical centres that people can walk into, and I think we hit our 150th centre around the country this week. So they're sort of all over the country, and they're the centres where you can make an appointment, go and see a GP, a counsellor, a doctor. You can get involved in any of the programs that they might be running for young people, and just get some support in a really, I guess, youth-friendly environment. They're sort of all created in a way that I guess takes away a lot of that clinical side of help and treatment and support to make it something that's really youth-friendly, and often done with a lot of youth involved as well, to make sure that there's those familiar faces there for young people.
Oh, it's so good to know that 150 centres around Australia are there supporting youth with their mental health, because we know that the pandemic has doubled the rate of anxiety and depression, and they're just the kids that are diagnosed. These are children and adolescents, probably younger than 12, which is the starting age for Headspace. But it's so heartening to know that this help is available, and the kids have somewhere that they can go where they feel understood. It doesn't feel too overwhelming and stressful, because those clinical environments can be a bit of a deterrent, and cost can be a deterrent as well. Is there a cost associated with seeing a counsellor or a GP?
No, most of the centres are free or really really inexpensive. But like everything, it's one of those things that we always need more. We need more funding. We need more people. We need all of those sorts of things, because as you said, the pandemic and a whole world of problems around us has meant that we are seeing increases in young people seeking out help, which is, certainly a wonderful thing that people are seeking out help. But we also know that some people are not seeking out help as much too, because they are, feel like that it's a little bit overwhelming to get that help. They hear all these stories of, waiting lists and all of those sorts of things. So it can be a tricky space for parents and carers and young people to navigate as well.
With your role at Headspace as a mental health educator, can you tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis when you're working with families and with youth?
Yeah, so I work with Headspace National as part of the Headspace Schools division. So we work doing a lot of the education. So a lot of the work that Headspace does is in that preventative space as well, and trying to help parents and carers as well as schools and other organisations. I'm even doing some work with Universities Australia to help support staff, students, parents, carers, to support the people around them with their mental health. So it's all, I guess, my day to day is a lot of presentations. So I give a lot of webinars and sessions on mental health, on how to have conversations with people around their mental health, and then how to get support around mental health. So it's really a lot in that education space, and trying to get, I guess, people to be proactive and preventative, and to do what we can to make sure that we're all mentally healthy. And that means also making sure parents and carers are also looking after themselves as well, so that they can, of course, support their young people.
Yes, and it's wonderful to know that there is support for parents and carers, because when we think about Headspace, a lot of people do think about that it is support when people do understand a little bit about Headspace, that it is support for youth mental health. And so, as parents, it's extraordinarily hard. We've all been through a lot of transition and change, and that's what life's like anyway, isn't it? There's always something to do, and there are stresses at different times in our lives and different times in the day. And so to be able to support parents to look after themselves and support their children, or supporting teachers to support their students, is not something that a lot of people would have been aware of is available. Do you have to, as a parent, does your child need to be working with Headspace and having engaged with Headspace's services for parents and carers to engage with those services themselves?
No, not at all. And I think, often one of the questions that we get at Headspace is that I want to, engage my young person in getting support, but they're unwilling, or they don't think that they want help, and so often it's just encouraging parents to phone up their local centre as well to get some information, or to go to the website, where there's so much help about how you can support your young person. And sometimes that is just baby steps, and letting your young person know that there is support out there in small ways. They're not always ready to go straight into a counselling session and those sorts of things. So we do encourage parents that they can always get help for themselves as well, because as we all know, the last couple of years have been really challenging for young people, particularly, but also, of course, then for their parents and carers who are working hard to try and support them and get what they need to do that, which is not always, readily available.
That's right. And it's so stressful, and it provokes so much anxiety in parents when their children are struggling with their mental health. And so to have that support available in that kind of environment, it's just another wonderful way that our listeners can seek help. And it's interesting, because one of the questions I get on occasion, and no doubt you do too, which you've just alluded to, is sometimes parents will say, how do I make my teenager get the help that I know they need? And I have a particular answer that I share. And I'm really, really interested to hear what you would say to parents whose teenagers might recognise things aren't great, but I'm just not interested in talking to someone. What would you say to parents in that situation?
Yeah, I think, as you say, it can be really hard to watch your young person to be struggling with their mental health, and know that it's something that you're wanting to help them with. But if they're refusing help, or saying no, I'm fine, I'm all good, or I don't want that sort of help, it can be really hard. So I guess it all really, for me, always comes back to the connection that you have with your young person, and really focusing on that connection to make it that whatever you want to talk about in terms of their mental health is a safe space for them to do with you, and that whilst you don't have to be the person that is there to necessarily fix them or help them or have all the answers for them, I really think it's trying to create those times and those space where your young person can have the ability to talk to you should they need it, but also just trying to, introduce help in a way that's, just can be, as I said, baby steps, incremental. It might just be introducing them to a website that you've seen that's got some great ideas on it. It might be an app on some breathing techniques. It might be, a yoga class that you can go to together, or that you can show them that's running online, or just little things that just remind them of the importance of looking after themselves, and that it's okay to not be okay as well, and letting people know that everybody can struggle at times with what's going on, and that it's okay for them to be struggling, and to really give them that space, and also for parents to, as we've said, get help for them as well, that for them to get help on how to help their young person, because as a parent, I think we always think that we have these young people, and our role is, when they're young, is to protect them. And then as they get older, then it's, well, we should fix them when things go wrong. And I think we know that it's not always easy for us to fix them. It's not always what they need either. A lot of times our young people just need to be heard. They just need to know that times are tough for them, and that they're struggling, and they don't always want the answers from us. They don't always want us to tell them they need to do A, B, and C. And I think it's important that parents understand that as well. That sometimes it's okay just to sit with your young person in whatever they're dealing with, and not feel like we have to rush off to book them into all these different places or appointments or all these things. Sometimes it's just sitting with them while they work through some of that stuff, and then work out what's going to be the best option for them, and talk them through that as to why, talk them through as to why they're not wanting to do that, to try and, I guess, just get curious about what's going on in their head, and why they might be reluctant.
Thank you for sharing that. It is very hard, and it is that natural instinct, isn't it, as a parent, to go, oh, I just want to make this better, because it's so hard to see our kids in distress, whether they're suffering physically, or whether they're struggling psychologically, and that evokes that stress and anxiety and that suffering in us as well. And that's part of, I think, what prompts us to want to solve this problem quick, smart. Whereas in that moment, if we can find a breath, take a pause, and give them that empathy and that validation, and that, like you say, really strengthen that connection, so they know that they've got someone to talk to. And I think parents often don't realise that really and truly, when it comes to our children's mental health, when there is a professional involved or not, we are the ones that can make the most difference for them, because we're the ones that spend the most time. So educating ourselves can also make such difference to supporting our children as well. So
yeah, and I think too, it can be, particularly when we've got young adults or teenagers, we can sort of think that we're a bit redundant at this time, because they're so much of their focus is on their peers and their friends, and what's going on in their world, that we can sometimes feel like that we don't have a role to play, because they're getting all of this stuff from everybody else. But I think it's really important that parents remember that they are still playing a massive role in all of that, and they are always still going to hopefully be that dependent one, that secure one, that's always there, and I guess all of this again focuses on creating and maintaining those connections that you have, that sometimes, again, it's not always easy. They do sometimes walk in and slam the door and tell them that they don't need what you've got to say, and all of those sorts of things, but being that constant, and just letting them know that you're always there, will certainly go a long way.
yes, I think so. I'm smiling because I'm reflecting on just this morning. Our daughter was watching a little bit of Super Nanny. She's not at school today, and she called me over to show me this family that was featured on Super Nanny. And I haven't seen Super Nanny in a long time. And goodness me, the difficulties these parents were facing were overwhelming. And the teenage girl had walked out, slammed the door after saying, whatever, And I said to our 12-year-old, I said, "Are you going to walk out and say whatever and slam the door when you're a teenager?" And she said, "Probably."
Yeah. And I think we also got to remember too, and for some that can be, anger can play a big part in young people's lives at the moment, particularly when they're going through a whole lot of stress. And we have to be able to recognize too that sometimes our response to that is a negative response as well, or we yell back, or we do all of those things because we don't want an angry child. We don't want someone that's showing signs of aggression or violence and all of those sorts of things. And of course we don't. But I think we also need to be careful that, when if a young person walks in, at the end of their day, and if they were crying or teary, and then they, walk past you and said that they were just upset, and you would go and give them a cuddle, and you'd find out what was going on, and you'd probably be pretty sympathetic and empathetic, because it's pretty hard to see a young person in tears. But when a young person walks in the door and slams the door and throws their school bag, and we probably often don't respond in that same way, when really that is just another way that person is playing out that emotional distress that they're feeling. And with that, gender biasing, it's often a male thing. Our boys do that a lot more. That anger comes out, and that's just often also because they haven't always grown up with that ability to be able to show their emotions, and it can be their way of covering up. So I think we also, need to look at sometimes at what's behind some of those secondary emotions, and be wary of, let them go. Don't go in there and necessarily have the conversation right there and then, because their emotions are heightened. And if we go in there trying to fix it and solve it, it's probably going to escalate. So yeah, we always say too, just give them some time to work through that, and then have the conversation, away from that heightened emotion, I guess. So yeah, just another thing for us to think about.
Add it to the list.
Mm,
Um, when it comes to parenting, there's so many challenges, and so these conversations are so helpful, because it is easy to react, because there's that contagious nature,
mm,
isn't there,
mm.
of these emotions, and it we see our kids, and we can see it on their faces from the time we roll up at school pickup. Before they've even hopped in the car, if there's something going on, and your heart can sink and your stomach can tighten, and yeah, I think it's really nice for us to be reminded to tune into ourselves, and that, whatever they're bringing to us, it's helpful if we can remind ourselves that it's an emotion, and it's an expression of emotion. And even if it is, and there's, I remember what we used to say to the kids: it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hurt someone. So, or
Yeah,
break anything, that, and helping them find healthy ways to express that, so that they can move through it and they don't feel they
yeah.
have to wash it. Because if we can't show them that we can handle it, they won't show that to us, will they?
No, absolutely. And I think, it's good sometimes to reflect on times when conversations with your young person have not gone well. And I'm sure we've all got them. As you said, I'm a mother to 5 boys, so I have plenty of those in the that I can reflect on. But despite always having the best of intentions, sometimes our conversations don't go to plan. So we can think, they come in, maybe they're a bit grumpy, or they've done something, and we can say things like, I'm sick of you walking around in a huff. What's wrong with you? And expect them to respond, and expect them to sit us down and tell us all the things that's going on in their life, when that's the tone that we've used. Or why don't you just tell us what's going on so we can all get some peace? Again, that's not inviting. That's not inviting them to open up. It's not giving them a safe space for us, for them to tell their story, because what we're asking of them is to just be quiet and give me peace. So it's all about me rather than me finding out what's wrong with you. It's sort of giving them the message that we don't care as much about what's going on with you. We just want there to be some peace. And there's that classic one, I guess, which is, why would you do that? And I know we've
Mm.
all often said that before, but it's, again, we're not going to get the response that we want. So I guess it's, whilst we can say all these things because we often do them in the heat of the moment, I think we have to, I guess, look at what are we aiming to get out of that conversation. And if we're wanting our kids to open up about what's going on for them, and what's going on with their mental health, then we have to be mindful of the messages we're sending them, and whether we're giving them the space to do that. And sometimes that's not always the case, and it's absolutely not always easy, and we're always going to make mistakes. But I think it's just good to sometimes reflect on those mistakes as they happen, or those incidents that's happened, and so that we can try and do better when we can.
Oh, when we know better, we do better. That's something that
Yep.
I have always been taught growing up in my family, and it's something I love to share because I think we can be hard on ourselves, can't we? And we want to get it right. We want to do and say the right things, but we are human. We are imperfect, but we learn through experience. And
Yep.
when you have even just that idea as a parent, because when emotions are running high, kids are coming in hot and you're feeling wound up yourself as soon as you kind of get wind of that, the part of the brain that helps us make sort of good decisions can be unavailable to us as well if we
Mm,
become very stressed. So I think to know that under these circumstances, we don't have to solve it. It's
mm.
about empathy and validation. That's what I say. I always say empathy first, empathy first. And I've also said that to Pete walking down the hall if there's been something going on with one of the kids and we're broaching it together, which is normally one or the other, but just walking down the hall, empathy first, because
Yeah.
and then we will often say, well, what is it that you need right now? And often the
Mm.
answer is, I need some time alone.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
we revisit, and I'll often say to, can I come back and check on you in sort of half an hour or 15 minutes or so? And the answer is normally yes. And then by then,
Yeah.
been a bit of settling, and then it opens that gateway, doesn't it, to
Yeah.
possibly a conversation then, or an opportunity to at least have a brief chat and then arrange for a conversation at another time.
Yeah. And I think it's okay for us to also, admit that we didn't handle things as well as we would have liked, or that, we made mistakes, and, our kids are okay to hear that. And I've certainly done that, sorry, that wasn't handled the best way. And that's a good thing for them to know as well, that again, we're not perfect. We're trying, and that it's okay to make mistakes in anything in life, and that is how we learn. And we let them know that I didn't do the right thing, but I've learned from that, and hopefully, it'll be different next time, or we'll just keep trying. So I think that it's certainly okay for us to admit and let our children know that we're not perfect either.
I think so too. And if you're using that kind of language, no doubt one of these days it'll come back to you. Sorry, I
Yeah,
didn't handle that as well as I could have. And that's music to your ears, isn't it? Because you know that
yeah,
in our mistakes, in our imperfections, there's so much rich learning that's happening, and that's life, isn't it? There's so
yeah,
much that that's the thing. There's lots of ups and downs, and one of the things I'm really passionate about helping young people and parents and anyone who listen really to know is that it's just not normal to be happy all the time. It's actually not what's normal for anyone. It's not the human experience. And anyone who looks like they're happy all the time is putting on a front. And we see this in social media, don't we? We see this a lot
yeah.
in social media. And how do you find social media? It's so interesting, isn't it? Because there was so much connection through digital devices over COVID, which we encouraged. I know of
Mm,
lots of kids who got phones early or
mm,
were given much more scope in terms of their online gaming with friends, just purely to have that chance to connect. And I'd be interested in your insights, and no
mm.
doubt lots of parents and educators listening to us will be interested as well in having this new transition out of COVID. Or it's still a part of our lives, but we're in a very different sort of set of circumstances now. All kids back at school and everything. How is that playing out, and what sort of challenges are you seeing in families as a result of
Mm.
digital devices?
Yeah, well, as you said, during the last couple of years, we saw a massive uptake in the digital devices. Yes, younger kids were getting them younger, and it was for a lot of reasons. One, yes, we certainly were all engrossed in these devices to continue to learn and to work and to be informed and entertained and socialized and connected. So they do a whole lot of stuff for us. So particularly when you're locked down at home, you need other avenues to connect with people, to learn, to get your information, and all of that. And so we sort of went, from zero to hero for a lot of young people who had nothing, but then all of a sudden had a lot, and probably didn't get some of the education and training that they might have, at other times. And parents, we've got parents working from home trying to manage their own work. We've got kids trying to do remote learning and get logins and get them set up and print this out and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of stressful situations going on, and so the devices also became a way for people to continue to work, because I need you to just sit there and play that game. Now that you finish your schoolwork, you can have a couple of hours on the PlayStation because I need to do this work. And that was, a lot of people's reality. And it also became a way for a lot of those young people to connect with their friends, because we know how important connection is for our mental health, and certainly for young people who are so used to being around other people. So we needed them to have those avenues to stay connected, as did teenagers and adults as well. So it sort of played a really big role. And then as we've started to go back into some semblance of normality, I guess the biggest thing I'm hearing from parents is that we created some pretty bad habits over the last couple of years, and I used to just let them go because I had to, because I was on a conference call and I couldn't monitor what they were doing, and everyone else was chatting on this app, so I had to let them have it because that was the only way they could communicate with their friends. And now I don't know how to take it back, and so there's this feeling that we gave them all of this, and then now how do we start to take some of that back, or how do we take the step back that we might have had it been different circumstances. And so this is probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing, is that kids are probably doing a lot more things a lot earlier than they would have. They're on apps that they probably wouldn't have been on. They're longer online than they would have been on, because they got used to spending a couple of hours on a game, whereas before that they may not have. And unfortunately, we're also seeing some not going back into some of those sports or those other activities that they used to, particularly if it was, if it wasn't a real passion, but it was just something they did because, their mates did it, or it was just what was the done thing at the time. For those kids, it's harder to get that motivation now to go back and do other things, because, we build habits, and habits are sometimes very hard to break. And, we know they're hard to break for adults, and certainly very hard to break and for young people, and to rewire those brains and get them doing other things. So it's certainly been a challenge for a lot of parents. So I know that if that's you, rest assured you're not alone. So there is certainly that out there.
It's comforting to know, because I think most people are sort of nodding, thinking, yes, this is what, I know that's what happened in our home. And a lot of homes are the same. And so it's another transition, isn't it? And what do you say? How do you advise parents who are struggling with anything from girls who are just spending too long on Snapchat? I'm stereotyping here, but I'm just talking about what happens in our home, versus boys on online gaming platforms. I feel like we've been pulling it back, and we've got a much better approach now. And our approach here in our home is not to ever sort of say, right, you can have this many hours of time. We've gone for the approach that seems to be working well, is that, well, what's it displacing? So are you organising catch up with friends? Are you going for a kick of the footy after school when you haven't got footy training? Are you doing other things around the house, like bouncing on the trampoline or going out the swing, playing with the dog, doing chores and doing homework? I'm trying to get them to do touch typing, Martine, because I just think it's just such an amazing skill. So, there's lots of other things to do around the house other than actually being on a device. And I heard golden words last night. I just have to share this with you. I had golden words because I've recently had a conversation with the kids around dinners, and saying, I just sort of said at dinner time, I said, who likes to eat dinner? And everyone, the two kids put their hand up, of course, and and then I sort of thought, oh no, then there's that kind of eye rolling of, oh no, it's coming. And I said, you know what, everyone loves dinner, and I just don't think I should be the one that's predominantly responsible for the mental load. I had a quick chat about mental load and the preparation and the cooking and everything. Everyone pitches in at times, but it's very ad hoc. And our daughter said, Mum, I think it's time each of us cooked a meal one night a week. And I was like, oh, the angels are singing. This is
They're
just
golden words.
absolutely golden words. And their thing,
I've yet to hear them, sorry.
oh my gosh, I just never thought the day would come. And I said, those are some of the most special words I've ever heard in my life. And she said, even like, will you marry me? When Peter proposed. And I said, yep, it's up there with that. So
Yeah.
things like that, because I think chores is such an important part of family life, and we digress for just a moment, but um, they are other important ways that children need to be spending time on a fairly regular basis during the week as well. And so once those things are done or peppered in between, plus sports training and various things, well then, yeah, jump on and enjoy yourself. And we're not looking at watching the time other than for bedtime. So that's working well for us. What do you say to parents?
Yeah, look, I agree totally. And I've also never been one for minutes or hours or days of the week. And I know, not saying that that doesn't work for some families, that's what works. And that's perfectly fine. I do also say whatever works for your family, whatever sits in with your values and you're comfortable with. And I think, that question I often get around, well, how much time should my 6-year-old have on a device? How much time should my 12-year-old, my 15-year-old, all these sorts of things. And I think, as we've seen, the last 2 years have thrown all that sort of stuff out the window. But I think, it's important to not only ask, how much time, and I think what you alluded to is what I call that weaning off the screen, which is just try and pare it back a little bit. If it's something that's become overwhelming in your family and you feel like you've lost control, just take it back a little bit. And if they are going on too long, just ask them to get off a little bit earlier tonight, all those sorts of things, or make sure that they've got more time, doing other things that you need them to do. But I guess when people ask me, how much time, I always say there's 3 other questions that I want you to ask instead of how much time on a screen. And the first one is, what are they doing on that screen? And what is the nature of what they're doing? Because they could be, creating a song on GarageBand or making a movie, or they could be, researching, the habits of a green tree frog or something that they're interested in, and getting value out of that time. Or they could be watching something violent. They could be watching pornography. They could be engaging in a horrible cyberbullying episode. So no amount of time, if they're doing that, is good. So it's really about what is it that they're doing. It doesn't always have to be educational stuff. They don't always have to be being educated. And, sometimes it's okay for them just to scroll some videos that they want to watch, or watch music clips, or whatever they're into. And that's okay. But obviously we don't want that to be the only way that they're entertained or the only thing that they do. So it's what are they doing? What is the effect that what they're doing is having on them? So is it, something that may be really, might be having a conversation with a friend that's supporting them, where they're having a laugh that's helping them in that moment. They might be being uplifted or inspired by something that they're watching, or sharing, or doing, or creating a GoFundMe page or something. They could be doing something that's having a positive effect on their life. Or of course they could be having the opposite. They could be comparing themselves to what everybody else is doing, or what everyone else is wearing or seeing, or how many followers they've got, or could their self-esteem could be taking a real hit by their time online, or they could be negatively impacted in obviously a whole range of ways. They could be being groomed or scammed, or all those sorts of things. So of course, what is the impact that it's having on them, and on that individual child? Because we can also some kids can play a game, a video game, and play it for an hour, half an hour, and then get off and be perfectly fine. Whereas others might play it, particularly if it's a shooter game or a more violent game, and they can get off and be really agitated, and it can impact them over the next short period. So we need to be able to look at that individual as well. So what is the effect on them? And the last question is, as you alluded to, what are they missing out on while they're on that screen? And what is it that time is displacing, as you said? So, if if they still are not, keeping up with their schoolwork or some chores, or they're not, hanging out with their friends, or they're not taking the dog for a walk, or if all of those things start to slip, if they're not eating properly, sleeping properly, all of those sorts of things start to slip, then it's too much time if that's what they're doing instead of that. So it's really important that we look at our individual children, what they're doing, the effect, and what they're missing out on. And so if that is the case where you get to that point where you think, you are spending too much time, this is not happening, you haven't done this, you haven't done this. Again, it's about trying to have a conversation with them about that, so that we're not always just, making the technology the bad guy. It's the reason why I'm asking you to reduce a little bit of the time, or the reason why I don't want you on this is because of this reason, and having it as a conversation rather than just these, hard and fast rules, which I'm not saying you can't have rules and boundaries, you absolutely can, but talking to your young person about why it's important that they have a whole range of experiences, and that they need that for their development, and a lot of those didn't happen over the last couple of years. So it's important that we make the efforts that we can when we can.
Oh, I love that. I love that trio of questions. I'm going to share those questions far and wide, because they're great questions. What are they doing when they're on their device? What effect is it having on them, and what is it displacing? And when I think about one of the apps that our daughter's been using, she has been so active creating these little mini videos where it looks so fun. It's really engaging, and they're only short, so you do them over and over, and they try to hold poses so that they get snapped at the right time with the camera. And it's fun, and it's active, and it's creative. And so it's one of these times where they're creating something, they're not just consuming. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing around here.
Yeah.
A question I'd love you to answer for us is, with all the transitions young people have experienced over the last couple of years, what sort of concerns are they raising? How are they faring?
Yeah, it has been a big time of change and transition for young people. And we know any time, we know that change is always, it's inevitable. We always have to go through changes, but I think we've probably been through more than would usually be expected over the last couple of years. And so for some people that can be really challenging. And it's that, having to meet different expectations all the time. We've got expectations that we might have had to meet when we're at home and working from home, and then we go back to school and there's different expectations. There's different expectations we're seeing in the schoolyard and the classrooms. I know a lot of teachers have reported things about, kids coming in and not forgotten their social skills, but they're different. They're different to how they were playing out online, and now they've got, sometimes reassessing these pecking orders and all of this sort of thing going on, and working out where they fit in, and not always having that practice at hanging out with kids in the playground. That's where a lot of that learning happens. And so there's certainly been kids that have missed out on that at crucial times and crucial developmental times. And so all of that can be tricky. Many have gone to new schools where they, didn't know a lot of people. So they've had to do that largely, either from home and then come back in and see them. And I guess just that, in general, we like predictability. We like to know what's going on, and I think not knowing a lot of things can be really hard for a lot of people. Plans not going ahead, things not happening as they hoped, and so there are a lot of transitions that happen for young people, aside from all of the normal things, just learning, school, puberty, going through family breakups, relationship breakups, friendship issues, all of those things that are challenging at the best of times. I think they've probably been exacerbated over the last couple of years. So it's certainly been a time when some of that now is playing out, and some of our young people do need a bit more support with that.
How can parents identify when their children do need a little bit more support?
I think it's looking out for things that, are not the norm, I guess, for your child. Your young person probably better than anybody. And so we're often saying to look out for things that are different. We all young people change and develop at different times. But I think in terms of looking at emotions that might change, if they're getting a lot more angry or upset or frustrated or more anxious, all of those sorts of things. And if they're going on for longer periods than you would normally expect from your young person, or they're more severe, or they're coupled with a whole range of other things like maybe some behaviors that that are not normal for them. Maybe they're neglecting some of their friendship groups, or not wanting to do things that they used to want to do, or they're sleeping longer or less, or all of those sorts of things that on their own can be okay and can be expected. But when we see a few of these sorts of things together lasting a lot longer than is normal, then we certainly would be wanting to just check in and have those conversations with our young person. Of course, there's going to be some really obvious signs that your young person is in distress, things like self-harm and those sorts of things, which unfortunately have become a maladaptive coping strategy for a lot of young people. So those sorts of signs are things where we would certainly wanting to be getting help for our young person. So I think when it's when we've noticed things with our young person, the first thing is to try and have a conversation with them about it. Certainly not wanting to add shame or anger to that, because there's already a lot of that probably involved for them. So it's about trying to remain connected with your young person, have conversations about it, so you can together decide on what's the best way forward, what do you need, and what way can we get that help, knowing that for some of those things you may not be able to provide the help that they actually need.
Yes, and that's where places like Headspace come into the fore. And
Mm.
I wonder, with parents listening, if they are thinking, look, I do actually think after listening to this, I'd like to seek advice and get some more help. What are the ways that parents can go about doing that?
I think for parents it's also good to remember that not every situation needs clinical help. Not every situation requires you to see a psychologist or such. Certainly there are many that do. But I think it's good for parents, particularly if you've just noticed some mild to moderate changes in your young person, that what are all of the other options that are out there for you? So obviously, of course, you and your partner or carers want to be, the ones that are helping, but there might be some other adults in your life that can be a really good a good person for your young person to tap into. Maybe they have a really good rapport with, your sister or brother or uncle or auntie or work colleague, or and so who are the other people in their life? Maybe it's a coach that they've got a great rapport with, who might be able to sort of chat to them and those sorts of things. Of course, you've got your schools. Ring up the school and talk to the school counselor, school wellbeing person. They can be a good starting point as well. And you can obviously go to a GP. They can be a good starting point to give you some options as well. And then all of those community services that are out there, such as your Headspace, and looking at just getting support from those sorts of websites, and talking to other people as well. That can certainly be a great help for parents as well. But as I say, it's about trying to have a conversation with your young person about what they are comfortable with at that time, and just exploring what options that you have around you. But also just thinking, what else is out there for my young person, that even also might just be a good thing to do while we wait to get more professional help, or what are the things that we can do in our everyday to help them and to keep them safe at that time.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that you mentioned just now is the idea of parents talking to other parents. And it takes me back to those days in childcare and kindergarten and early primary school, where long before COVID, we were, if we had the privilege, we could walk our kids in, we could mill around, we could chat with other parents, we'd
Mm.
have coffee mornings organised, and we could talk. We could really
Mm.
talk. And if you had a really good group of parents who could be open, you could really just bounce ideas around and get
Mm.
some advice, maybe just get a little bit of empathy or a bit of, oh, I'm going through that too. What are you doing? And, sort of comparing notes. And it's really so supportive. And in my view, that unfortunately has changed for two reasons. In a lot of families, it's as kids get older, we tend to sort of drop and run,
Mm.
or kids are catching the bus and we're just not having that contact with other parents. And of course, COVID obviously got in the way of us being able to connect in those ways at the school gate. So I think it's
Yeah.
really great you raised that, because we can't underestimate the importance of those networks. And for parents listening, I don't know about you as listeners, but I know for myself, I'll often think about my friendship circles and I'll think, right, I want to bounce some ideas off someone about this one of our children, and so I'll ring the friend that has someone of a similar age or a little bit older, and then you might ring someone else depending on the circumstances. So it's good to build those networks and stay connected because they're so supportive, aren't they?
Oh, they are. And as you say, when our young people are little and they're babies, we talk about everything and we get advice on everything, from feeding them to a rash they've got. We ask questions about everything. And we lean on that support so much. And we certainly do lose that, I think, a lot, particularly as they get into that secondary school, because, as you say, we're not even dropping them at the school gate. They're getting to school on their own. We're not engaging with those parent communities as much. And so we don't tend to have that support. And we've often, our friends and ourselves have moved on. We're more involved in work and those sorts of things. So it's not so much our focus. So it can mean that we miss a lot of that. And so again, it's, there are lots of, support groups out there. There's, parenting seminars and things that happen at local councils that you might see, or community houses. So it's certainly a good idea to tap into those if that's something that you're struggling with, and reach out, because no doubt there'll be plenty of other people having very similar challenges.
Yes, there's got to be an app for that, doesn't it? Doesn't
Yeah.
there? There's got to be an app for that. Even Meetup. Like if you really, particularly, I think it's hard if you've moved, isn't it? Or you're in a new community, you've moved interstate or moved country, or we've got a lot of people who are coming across to Australia from other countries, and it's really hard to sort of connect. So Meetup, I understand, is an online place where you can post an event and organise to meet up with people with similar interests, and so there's lots of options there, but we can't underestimate that network. And I'm very lucky because I know you're in my network, and I'm really thankful that you've been able to join us for the podcast today and support this beautiful community of listeners to the podcast and help us learn from your amazing experience after so many years of doing such great work. And where can listeners find you?
As you said at the beginning, I do have my business, themodernparent.net, and through that you will find me a lot on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on the website itself that you can contact me. I don't spend quite as much time on social media doing my work with Headspace, so which I have to say has been a nice little break, but you can still certainly find me there. I will always be there somewhere, just not hanging out probably as regularly as I was, but always there to be found. And thank you for having me, Jodi. I've just loved this chat. I always love chatting to you, and I know it's a great podcast, and I've loved listening to it as well. So I'm pretty chuffed that you got me on as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, and I'm already thinking of what we can talk about next time we schedule another conversation. And actually, you've just given me an idea that obviously, I just overlooked the fact that online communities can be an extraordinary source of support. So that was just as you were talking about where people could find you. I'm thinking I overlooked suggesting that before too. So it's probably obvious. Yeah. Listeners are probably going, yes, Jodi, we already thought of that. No, look, thanks again, Martine. The work that you're doing is absolutely extraordinary. And for you to be able to share with us here today about Headspace, so that listeners have a better understanding about what's available to them and for their children as well, because there are a lot of families who are needing help and not necessarily sure which direction to turn, where to start. And also for sharing your wisdom around digital health and wellbeing. And there's plenty more conversations we can have about that down the line. So thanks again for your time. Thank you so much. And I will very much look forward to speaking to you next time. And for our listeners today, thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted to ask just a small favour. If you are enjoying the podcast, I'd love for you to help me grow the podcast by sharing an episode or the podcast with just one other person if you are enjoying it and learning. That's something I'd be extremely grateful for. So I thought I'd just mention that before we sign off. So Martine, thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it,
please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.